Alrighty. So welcome to our webcast today. I'm Aubrey Gilman. I'm a senior consultant at Collins, and I've worked there for, I don't know, since 1994, so 20-something years. Today I'm going to be just sharing with you some of the items that we all learned at this summit conference that was in Tampa this last October. And what I did was I went ahead and I asked some of the attendees, some of them were our clients and some were other clients that I just sat with at lunches, and I asked them what they were learning and what their kind of take-home was to the rest of the people in their organization. And so that's what I'm going to be sharing with you all today. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. If you can't, please raise your hand and send me a chat or something so that I can make sure that you guys can all see what I'm presenting today. So first, this is myself, and actually Mike Gilman is the one on the left, and he helps run the support organization at Collins. So I thought I'd share that with you and her lovely daughter and dogs. And I already told you a little bit about where I came from 22 years ago. And what my passion is I love sharing things like this with our customers. So hopefully it is what you want to see, and you'll learn something today. So what I did was, again, I asked folks, you know, what were your favorite sessions? If you had to attend a session again, you know, where would you go because you missed so much? And so these are some of the sessions that were everyone's favorites. And so I do encourage you, if you haven't ever gone to the GPUG.com website, so just GPUG.com, I encourage you to go out there. There's a lot of free resources, and you can also sign up to be a premier member of that. But when you go ahead and log in, you get all kinds of access to not only presentations and downloads, but also to the forums that are out there. And what I mean by that is there are open forums, there are IT personnel forums, that are financial forums, and you can ask questions to other users and partners that are part of the community. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump in and show you some of the tips that we're bringing back. So starting with number 16, I called this the Sweet 16 just because it's 2016 and I'm a bit of a sports fan. So this is like the Sweet 16 of the finals of who made it with the tips. So one of the things that people might not know is that you do have free access to the Professional Services Tools Library from Microsoft GP. And these products used to run about $500 for each of these little tools. And through the years, Microsoft has said, well, really these should be part of the product. And so if you don't have them, regardless of what version you're running, I believe it goes back to version 2010. If you're running prior to that, you might need to talk to us. But we can load this on your system, and it gives you access to all kinds of tools out there. So what I'm going to do is show you a couple of the tools that come for free. I'm going to go ahead and log into GP and go to my home page. And if you have authorized access to the library, when you click on it, you'll see this big screen come up. And you can do things like, hold on one second, can you? Sorry, somebody's questioning which webinar they're joining, so I wanted to make sure they knew, and I just want to respond to that. Okay, so in here, you'll see that there's an account modifier combiner. There are item modifiers and combiners, customer name modifier, fixed assets, there's employee, and what that does is allow you to go back through your records in GP and modify the IDs so that, let's say that you had an account number, so I'm going to go ahead and go in here. Let's say that you had an account number out there, and we're just going to pull up some accounts. And you were calling it the AR for Singapore. And you wanted it not to be 1277, but you wanted it to be 1278. So what this tool allows you to do is go ahead and just put that in there and convert all of the transactions so that in the history, anytime you look up an account or a transaction that had 1277, it would now be under 1278. So it's running through all the tables in GP that hold what's called the account index, and it's moving all of the transactions there. Now, it does tell you to reconcile your years, because as transactions are posted, the summary tables are updated. And so they want you to run reconcile so that the summary tables for that account will now show with a lot of warnings, please reconcile. So that's how you would run that. Now, the nice thing is that if you were going to do a lot of account numbers, let's say that you had, and I'm not going to run through this during our demo, but just so you get kind of the idea. But let's say in your chart of accounts you had all kinds of different departments, and this department, instead of being 600, was supposed to be like 610. So I could actually export all of these account numbers to a spreadsheet. My first column would be the old account number. My second column would be the new account number. So I could take that, import it, validate it, which would just mean it's going to go and make sure that all the left-hand account numbers existed, and then convert them all at once. So during these account modifier combiners, you can be changing not only one, but multiple IDs at the same time. Now, when I say combiner, instead of modifying and changing one account number to another account number, you could actually say, I need to change and merge two. So let's say, not maybe just account numbers, but if I had inventory items and I created two inventory items with two different IDs, and it ended up that I needed them both under the same one, so I could go ahead and put them both onto the same, in this case, an inventory site. So if I had site AAA and site BBB and I needed them both to be ABC, I could bring them both into that account or that site. So that type of change is available for fixed assets, employees, inventory, financials, and all types of other things. The other thing that this can do, if I go back to my PowerPoint, is you'll see that not only can you run modifiers and combiners, but you can use it to update particular user dates, document date verify, so there's all kinds of other tools. If you need something, you could always ask us, and we'll tell you if it's in the professional service tool library. This last month, I noticed that there was an issue with something in 2016, and it had to do with some mass transactions and payroll. And so when we went to Microsoft, normally if there's an issue, they might say, oh, you have to upgrade and go to a service pack. What was interesting is they actually put the fix in the chunk file for this professional services tools. So all we had to do was load an update to this program, and we got that fix. So I do believe that Microsoft may be going that way and providing fixes for some of these products with a little chunk file rather than having to update all of GP. So kind of a nice thing. I'm going to skip and go to the next one, refund checks. So you've had this in the system for many releases, but people aren't using it. And so the customers were like, wow, I didn't realize it was so easy to use. What this is all about is, let's say that you had a customer, they overpaid, and they don't want to wait to be paid back until the next invoice that they have. They actually want you to refund that payment. And so it does become a process because you've already got their cash receipt out there, you've posted it, so now you would have to create a document in AR to offset it. You'd have to create a vendor. You'd have to create an invoice or some sort of credit document on the payable side. And then you would have to go ahead and select checks and run checks. So it's at least a 5-step process. So what I'm going to do is very quickly show you how this works. It's nice, and it takes care of all the steps for you. So we're going to go out here, and we're going to go into refund checks. And I'm going to just create a batch. I've already created the batch. All it does is point to what checkbook I'm going to use. And I could specifically know I'm going to pay a customer back, and I could pull up their ID and try to pay that customer back. But if I had multiple customers, I could even say, yeah, go out, find all my credit balance customers, because there's a few of them out there that sent these payments ahead of time and they want the money back. So what the system did was go ahead and just scan over and see if there are customers out there that fit those requirements. What's nice is that I can also say, you know, this 58-cent one, I don't even want that to be considered. So when I put this in, I can put a threshold of what I want my minimum balance to be. So I can say $5. So then when I go ahead and say insert, it's only going to find 3 of them. The other thing you're going to notice is that these customers don't yet have vendor IDs. Now I could go create that ahead of time, or I could just select one, say I want to create the vendor. It's going to take the information from the customer, it's going to bring it over, and it's going to make it a temporary vendor. Now, if I want, I could go ahead and say, no, this is going to happen a lot, so we want to go ahead and make them active. And all that means is at the end of the year, it's going to remain. If I run a process at the end of the year that says I want to delete all my temporary vendors, I could do that, but then this vendor would stay out there. I could also say, no, for this one, I want to remove it. I don't want to pay them back. And again, for this one, I want to go ahead and create the vendor. So very quickly, I can create all the information that I need based on what I've selected. Now, the other thing, I'm going to go ahead and remove this one. The other thing I could do is then just hit process. It's going to say, are you sure? And I can get offered all kinds of posting journals. I'm only going to do one. And then you'll see that my posting journal comes up. After I do that, I'm going to go ahead and, I didn't create a batch, so I need to go quickly create. What I did was, okay, that's interesting. I created a batch earlier, and I need to create a new one because I created a CC, and then I posted some documents, so it is telling me that I needed to create my batch. Usually that's not going to happen because you're not going to have a batch out there with the same item already created. So let me go create my receivables batch very quickly. Not receivables, purchasing. Sorry about that. See, this is a live demo. So it's just my computer check batch. Hopefully I selected the right one, so we'll see if that's out there now. Oh, come on. And I've put it into, and okay, this is the first time in my demo of 10 times that this has happened, so let me go ahead and do this one more time. We're going to do it this way. I'm going to go back to this one and clear it. Sorry, guys. Do this again. Insert it. And I'm going to go ahead and print this one.
When you come back, I'll let you know.
Okay. We'll transfer it. So same process, except that now I don't already have a batch out there that I've created the same thing, so it's going to cost me that. And it would come up here, and it would say, now I can print my payables checks. Now, if you wanted to have segregation of duty, then at this point that person would not be able to print the checks. But if you do have the same person that could create the documents and go ahead and create the check, then this octagon check that I just created would be out there. And then I could either post or process those. So this is the step that I already had an ABRA CC out there that I didn't process, so it wouldn't let me go ahead and do it again. That's where my little issue came up. But now, if I go ahead and I look at that customer, and I do an inquire, where's the inquire? You would see that on the payable side, it went ahead and it created the offset for my debit for $4,500 so that it was against my credit for $4,500 that I had. And then on the purchasing side, it went ahead and it created the vendor for me initially. It also created a miscellaneous document, and then as soon as I would go ahead and post that payment, both this miscellaneous document that it created and the payment would move into history. But since I didn't post them right now, they're still sitting open, so I wanted you to see all of that. And when you go ahead and set up refund checks, it asks you things like what you want the next document number to be and what account numbers you want it to be hitting as it kind of passes through. So when I go ahead and do distributions, it knows what account numbers I wanted it to use as that clearing or suspense account. So in that step, it's creating those 3 documents, the vendor, and offsets all of it for you. So pretty cool. If you do have questions, you can ask them. I just want to make sure that we kind of go through the system a little bit quick. So purging data tips. What I found when I was talking to these customers that were at the show is a lot of people are thinking about upgrading. And when we usually talk about people upgrading, they look at how much data they have in the system. And many of our customers have been using the system for many years. And so they've got a lot of databases out there that are huge. And so normally around the time that people are thinking about upgrading is when they're also thinking about how do I get rid of some old data. And so here, there's a product out there, and I'm going to show you 2 ways. I'm going to show you that there's a product called the Company Data Archive Tool by Professional Advantage, and then I'm going to show you, if you don't have that tool, how you can get rid of some of the documents within your system and what the difference is. So if you do purchase this tool, what it allows you to do is within all of the different modules of GP, so financial, purchasing, sales, inventory, payroll, and then project accounting, and even other tables that you can just use as user-defined tables. So if you've got some third-party products that you want to also move data over or get rid of, then you're allowed to do that within this program. And you could say, you know what, anything prior to the year 2000, I want to go ahead and archive. And what it will do is it will create a second database. So from your live database, we would be creating an archive database. And every year, if you wanted to run this process again, you could choose to move that data into your, quote, archive database, or you could create a new archive database. Now, what is kind of nice about that is, I'll show you in a minute, but when you go ahead and run your archive process, this module will tell you not only like what it's going to archive ahead of time, but then what it did archive. You get a choice of about 6 different reports, and you can run a lot of these pre-archive, and it will even tell you in the system, and I'll show you in a moment, that it will tell you some tools that you can run to make your database quicker without even archiving. I will tell you that there's a Professional Advantage website that you could just go out and see quick demos of how to run the product. But what I was going to mention is that you create an archive database, and within your live database, if you keep that archive database, you just moved it to a different database with all of that older data in it, you could be within your live company and say, I want to not only look at my work and open in history and things like receivables, payables, financial, but I also want to include my archive database. And I could look at transactions across the 2 databases. So if you want to keep that information, you just don't want it in your database that you're running day to day, you can put it to the archive database. And the reason that you'd want to do that is things like your payables transaction history reports start to take longer and longer because you've got a lot of history out there. So instead of having it in your current database, you can move it to a new one. Now, you can also delete the archive database after a certain amount of time, or delete your second archive database. So let's say you've put everything over to that second database called archive, and then after another 5 years, you want to move it out of the system, so you'd move it to archive 2, and then you delete that archive 2 database. I mentioned that it also comes with some tools that you can run. So when you have a menu in GP, it'll have all these company data archive options that you can run pre and post tools. You can run these tools that tell you, hey, if you run some update statistics in SQL, you may get some speed back, and it will tell you, I know this is a little bit blurry. I took screen prints, and for some reason it just didn't come across very cleanly. But it would tell you where you might have like this update statistics that you can rebuild your indexes and get a little bit of speed out of your system. So it's a tool not only for archiving, but also for just analyzing your data. Now, if you don't want to buy a third-party product, you can, within GP, run some what we call remove transaction programs. However, it isn't moving it to another database. It's just deleting those records out of your database. So the first thing we're recommending is, obviously, you're going to do backups, and we'd probably want to take a copy of your live database, make a test, run it there first, make sure that is what you wanted. When you're running these remove processes, you can also say, you know what, don't remove it yet, just show me what you would remove. And so in all of these screens that I'll show you in a minute, you can say remove and unclick them and just run a report instead. So there's that, there's the processes. Now, most people, when they're looking to delete, they're going to say things like, you know, I want to go to my inventory items and I want to delete the things that I don't use anymore. Or I want to delete customers or vendors or account numbers that I don't use anymore. The thing is, if you try to go in and just hit delete, it's going to make you delete the transactions first. It won't let you just delete the master records. So, again, I suggest that you do this in a test database first. But under financials, if you go to Microsoft Dynamics, Tools, Utilities, and then either financial or sales or purchasing, under all of those, you're going to have a bunch of remove options on your menus. The thing is, with the Company Data Archive tool, it's one program, right? It's one menu. It's one screen that comes up, and you can delete them from all the other areas at the same time. But within Dynamics, you'd have to run them one at a time. So each of these that you're deleting, transaction history and period history and invoice history, those are different options on the screen. So it's going to take a while to run them all. But for this one, like this one is for financial, you would say, I want to delete prior to this year, and you'd give it a year. And you'd say whether you want just transaction history or account history, and whether you want to remove or just print what it would remove. You can also do it in ranges, so date rather than the pure year. You could do the same thing in, like I said, sales, purchasing, inventory. And as I mentioned, when you look at these menus, you have options that you're going to have to run through each one of these if you want to delete all of the different tables. But once you do that, so if this one was for sales and I'm going to remove all of them, once I run all these, then I can go to the mass delete in for customers and say, now I want to delete my customers that don't have transactions. So it takes a while. It doesn't go to a test or archive database. It just deletes them, but it is possible within GP. And then here's the inventory. So there are two more things I wanted to mention, and that's that there are a couple of places that are under these routines menus. The other ones were under utilities, but under routines that they look like they're going to remove things. And under these two programs, so if you go sales routines, paid transaction removal, in this case it's moving your sales documents from open to history. That's all it's doing. As long as in your system you've said you want to keep history, and that is the default when we set up GP for you, as long as you have that it wants to keep history, then for this, it's just moving your transactions to history. If you run sales, you've probably noticed that everything stays open until you run this process, and then it puts them in history. Now, for purchasing, I mentioned when I was doing refund checks that as soon as you pay a vendor and that invoice and that payment are both posted, those will go to history automatically. And the theory behind it is that you're writing the checks, you know they're good, so as soon as you print your checks and you post them, it moves to history. But on the sales side, let's say you get a payment, a cash receipt from a customer, and you go ahead and put it in the bank, you put it against the invoice, and then for some reason the check bounces. Well, if they're in history, there's not a good way to bring them out of history. So they stay in open, and then you run the pay transaction removal and say, yep, the things that cleared last month, let's go ahead and move them to history. So that's why they operate differently in payables and receivables. And so these two routines, they just move things to history. They're not really deleting. So yes, kind of the moral of the story is that we do suggest that our customers look at that product called the Company Data Archive, because it does make it simpler if you're trying to remove history. And we've had many clients run it, and it honestly only takes about a half an hour to install. And I've run it and installed it with a client in less than an hour. So we've even archived. Now, granted, if you've got millions of records, it's going to take a little longer. But this customer had been running on GP for about 10 years, and we archived a couple of years off. Okay, Management Reporter. A couple things about Management Reporter. You might have heard that back in May, Microsoft said, you know what, Management Reporter is out there. We're not sunsetting it, but we're also not going to enhance it any longer. So I'll talk about that later in this session. But we know that most of our clients are now using Management Reporter. And so one of the sessions that we had was, it was called Dynamics Idle, and one of the participants said, hey, I want to show you this great thing. You can use Management Reporter for budgets. And while he was showing that, what I found when I was talking to the customers is that that's great, but he had a column in there, and I'll show you it, but it showed, here's Management Reporter, and instead of putting budgets like 2017 actual and then in the next column budget and the next column variance, he swapped it, and he said, I'm going to have my current year here, my next row is going to be my budget, then I'm going to have a dollar variance and a percentage variance. But he was also able to tell the system, hey, if it's a negative, put that in red and a negative, and if it's positive, put it here. And so I wanted to share with you what that looks like in Management Reporter. And what people found was not just for this, but they didn't realize, and I'll pop into Management Reporter to show you, they didn't realize that you can use these if, then, else statements. So on a row, and I'm going to go ahead and pop over to Management Reporter. So I have a report, and I've got rows and columns and trees, and this is just my financial and account activity. If I open up this row, I have what I was showing on the screen. I have my current year with some account numbers out here. I have my budget, and it shows which budget to use. And then I've got this total of here's my budget minus, or here's my current year minus my budget. And then the next one is a calculation. If this row 50 is less than 0, then show it as a negative, 60 over 50. Otherwise, show it as a positive. So not that, maybe you can't wrap your head around why you would use this in one of your reports right now, but just understanding that you can do this if, then, else inside Management Reporter, you might end up using it. And so I'm just going to go back and show that this report actually existed. And so, I don't have a lot of data in here, but then I can drill down and I can go to my different account numbers, and depending on the report, it could be that it's showing, the actual account numbers on it. So you could use this in really any kind of report, and it goes all the way down to transactions. And then if I had it zooming back to GP, I could still do that. But again, it was kind of finding one tip on the way to another, so kind of a cool thing. All right, number 12. This one is really just a link to tell you that there were some sessions that went over, I'm an admin of GP, and I'm asked to do all of these things like, turn off some Smartlists for people and combine checks and rename employees, and all these things always tell me that I have to be SA. So there was a whole session on how do I get to these activities and not be SA. And so there's a link within here that you can go out, and Mark Polino is the person that presented it. He works for FastPath, who actually is one of the vendors who they have a product that will help you segregate like your duties of people doing things like putting invoices in and posting checks and printing checks and do validity checks. And that had nothing to do with what he's showing here. It's just that they realize that segregation of duty is important and not everybody should have SA. So this is just a link out there to show you that you can do all of these different things without having to be SA. You could just be a very high authorized user within SQL. Okay, number 11. Everybody loves Smartlist. And so I would say that maybe 95% of our customers in the past would purchase Smartlist Builder because it was a product that allowed you to take your Smartlist, maybe merge different tables together, go across company, and do all of these things within Smartlist. And so you couldn't combine tables and things like that in the past with just Smartlist. You had to buy Smartlist Builder. Well, now, as of about version, I think it was GP 2013, Smartlist Designer came in. And Smartlist Designer is free to people that own GP, and it does the same thing. It allows you to go ahead, and I'm going to pop back into GP. It allows you to go ahead and do Smartlist and join different tables together. Now, what's really unique about what I want to do here and show you is that I can have these tables that have all of these fields that are not necessarily in like one table and then another table. So I'm going to go into modify. So this is a smart list that I created in Designer. All I did was create it with my name, and then here are the tables. And if I looked at GP, I might have gone, here's every table in GP, and maybe as I zoom down these tables, I would have realized that I used a couple of the tables in GP, but what you'll notice is that I didn't. What I did instead is I used what's called views. So not only can Smartlist Designer look at every GP table, it can look at all of these third-party products that I might have installed. And then at the bottom, it's views. So whether it's a system view, which means it exists in the Dynamics database, or it's a company view, which means it exists in each of my company databases. So with this, I can say here I've got a view that's called Payables Apply and GL Distribution that somebody wrote, and it could be out of the box. GP comes with some views, but if I maybe work with Collins as a partner, or I have some people in my organization who can write SQL views, they would be exposed here. I could go ahead and click on that. So if I went down here, you'd see payables. I don't know what it was called. But I could click on any of the tables or any of the views, and I could say I want every single field to appear, or I could unclick this and I could say I just want a couple of fields to appear. Okay, so it's up to you. And then I can join the names. So I can do all this. What's really cool about Smartlist Designer is once I do that, I can execute the query within Smartlist Designer, and I could see that I actually have data. So in Smartlist Builder, I was always forced to like go out and then see if it worked. But here, I already know that I'm getting data. The other thing that is nice, and why I'm in here to show you this, is once I have this Smartlist out here, I could just export it to Excel, right? So I could export it and it would bring all my data out here. But instead, let's say that I wanted to be able to be in my Smartlist, but I want to publish it out to people, and it says I already have done this, but that's okay. But I want to publish it out to people that don't necessarily log into GP. And I want them to be able to refresh that. So what this is doing is that this is going out, it's publishing it to some, folder that I've created out in my network, and I can have somebody successfully published it, and that person, as long as they have SQL access to my tables, so I can create a user in SQL, they can refresh that view. And what that means is if right now I went ahead and did another transaction for Ace Travel, that person could refresh their Excel report outside of GP and get that transaction information. So the great thing about Smartlist Designer is it's free, and you can publish anything with a view. So that's the only caveat, is that it can't just be regular GP tables. So if you did have a Smartlist that you use all the time, and it was on certain tables in the system, you could ask us to help you write a view that had that information so that you could create a refreshable Excel report that people can run. And that's all within the system. The other thing, I just said that you could ask us to help you do it, right? So we could write it on our system and then export it out, and then you can import it into your system. So it's not that even we have to have access to your system. We could do it on ours, and then you could just import it into yours. So kind of cool. Number 10. The winners. And the reason that I went over this is I said, you know, people go to these conferences to learn a lot. It's also that these users that are at the conferences are active in the GPUG community, so the GP user group community. And so here are some people that this year, all of the people in GPUG voted, and they said, who do we think this year went above and beyond and helped users in the community? And so there's always at least one partner, one customer, and then one person that kind of falls in between, that maybe they're a vendor or somebody, but they don't work directly with GP customers. And so these were the 3 people this year. The reason I'm sharing this with you is if you do go out to the GPUG website and you see that they're doing webcasts or that they have some products that they're you know, talking about, or in the open forum they're answering questions, they're a reliable source, right? They've been around the community. They do know what they're doing. As GPUG members, your company can go and participate in these chapter meetings. So last month, I live up in Oregon now, so I was at the GPUG Portland chapter meeting, and I actually presented this webcast that we're doing today. And there were a lot of different customers there. Some of them were mine, some of them were not mine. We do the same thing in Irvine. We do the same thing in Arizona chapters. So as a chapter, you can participate, and your chapter can also win things. And people got this Chapter of the Year award in Wisconsin, and Minneapolis-St. Paul got the actual chapter, not just the leader, but the Chapter of the Year award. The other thing that happened at Summit is that we had these sessions that were idle sessions or shootouts to show kind of the best tips and tricks. And so these are just other names of people that participated that I am giving a shout out to. You saw that a minute ago I was sharing with you what Mark Polino said about the SA users. And Belinda Allen, I mentioned her even though this year she didn't win the shootout. She's won, I think, the last 5 years. But she is an incredible BI knowledgeable person, and I'll talk about Power BI and we'll bring her up again. And this year Mark won because, quite frankly, he gave some very easy tips in Excel, and I'll share those with you. And then again, there's just a couple of other awards. There was the SQL Shootout Award. So Steve Enzo wore his Superman costume to say, I'm a super SQL user and I can share some really easy tips with you. So there's sessions on that. And then the Richard Whaley Award, he was somebody who wrote a lot of user manuals for GP, and he passed away a few years ago. So there's an award out there for those customers that just have really gone above and beyond and attended all kinds of trainings in the GPUG community. And just we want to recognize that they are trying to become, a really knowledgeable user and give back to the community. So that was Rhonda. As a customer, if you just get on the GPUG website and participate, you can get different levels. So these are just users who went to different levels and have participated in the community, and you could get your name in big lights. All right, Let's go back to Smartlists for a minute. So there's something called an export solution. And I want to show you what I'm talking about before I actually just show you how to use it. So I'm going to go back to Smartlist. And I have a Smartlist out here that I use every day. And it's under sales transactions. And, you know, I kind of keep an eye out on what my week's orders look like. And probably I quickly export it out. I'm going to get a message just because it's having a little issue with accessing that data. But so I can export this. But once I do, because I'm looking at it all the time, I then like highlight a column and I sort and I maybe put things in bold and I do all these things over and over again. So instead, what can happen is I can be in my Smartlist. I can create what's called an export solution, and when I export it, not only does it bring it to Excel, but it does all that formatting. So in this case, it just reordered some things. It put the lines in. It put the red. It put the headers. So just formatting. And I didn't do anything just now. You saw it. I literally just opened it. So export solutions, if you are in a Smartlist and you click on Smartlist and you go down to export solutions, it allows you to create what I just did. So I'm just going to show you kind of what happens. I create my Smartlist, and in this case it was sales transactions, and it was this week's orders. Actually, it was this one. This week's orders. And when I exported it, it went to just my default place. So I just picked where it went. What I did with that is I exported it, and then I did 2 Excel macros, and then I put them in here. And then I hit save. Let me show you a little bit about how that works. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in it, but I'm just going to go back out to Excel to show you. So in Excel, you may not have your developer ribbon turned on. Let me open this up. And let me move this to the side. I don't know if it's in your way, but it's in mine. But when I'm in Excel, I have this developer ribbon. And under developer, I have record macro. And I can just call it whatever I want. And what it does is once I say yes, record it, every keystroke that I do is being recorded. So I can go and do all kinds of formatting and sorting and everything else. And then I would go back up to my developer and now stop recording. And then I've got a macro. So in my PowerPoint, I'm telling you how to do what I just showed you. And what you may notice is that your developer ribbon is not even there in Excel. So that's the only thing that I wanted to kind of caution you on, is if you go into Excel, here we go. If you go to File and Options, and then Customize My Ribbon. So it may be that you don't have this developer clicked, and that on the right-hand side would not give you the record. So you just have to make sure that that is checked. So that's where in my PowerPoint it says go to Excel, go File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and make sure that you check the developer ribbon option. And then go into GP, create your Smartlist, and then export it so that you can bring it into Excel, and then go ahead and just record a macro. So I've got some screen prints to show you exactly how to do that, and then some recommendations for what kind of formatting might I want to do. But you guys know what you do every day. You're formatting this and wasting a lot of time. And then the only other thing you have to do is record a second macro. And that second macro is just going to clear your data. And why I'm doing that is so that this works for basically any Smartlist or any set of data. If you don't do where you just click on here, you say record macro, click on here, hit the delete, so it deletes all your data, and that way it doesn't matter how many records you have in there, it'll select them all. So that's just the second macro. And if you look here, in that setup, I had my preparation macro, which is clear, because first it's going to clear the data, and then it's going to format, so that it doesn't have to have the same amount of records every time. And that's it. And if you need help, you can call our support department, and the guys will be really happy to help you out. So then when you do go into Smartlist and you go Excel, I want to export, instead of just having the quick export now, it'll go ahead and have your export solution all waiting for you. So it's a pretty cool little feature. And that goes back to, I don't know, at least version, well, when Smartlist came in. So maybe 8. So it's been out there for a long time. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes on workflow. And the reason that I'm spending the time on it is because it's not as scary as it may sound. So how you kind of get into workflow is first by realizing that there's some other options in GP that you've probably never used, and that's the navigation list. And so I'm going to show you why some people may start using navigation list, and then I'll show you a little bit about how workflow works. So I'm going to pop back over. I'm going to close Smartlist, and I'm going to go to first my home page. And what you'll notice is that there's, my home page, and then there's other options always. So if I go to something like purchasing, if I click on purchasing, it's just these menus. But if I click on anything else, like vendors, it's going to go ahead and it's going to say, all right, I'm going to pull up a navigation list. And it's going to take a little bit of time because it's going to read all the records under vendors. So if I went to payables transactions, it would pull up my payables transactions or my payables batches, or if I was using purchase orders, it would pull up all my purchase orders. And it brings it into this screen. And let's say that I'm going to start using where I can print a PO and automatically email it to my vendor, because that's possible in GP. So if I wanted to do that, I would have to go into every single vendor record, and I would have to say edit, and then go out to email, and then tell the system that, yeah, because these don't come automatically checked, that, yeah, I want to be able to do things like send documents as attachments and use document attachment and use all of these forms like to email. So I'd have to go through every single vendor to do that. Instead, I could use navigation, and I could click on either each vendor, and then I could go directly to email settings, and for all of those vendors, I can say, yep, let's go ahead and use attachments. Let's say you can't have more than 5 megabytes for an attachment, and I want to enable this and send them as PDFs. And it would go through, and for each of those vendors, it would go ahead and go, yep, now it's set. If I had clicked on this top click here, it would actually select all my vendors, so I could do that for all my vendors at once. And so navigation list, if I think of it a different way, I could say, hey, I want to take this vendor and that vendor, and I could add filters. So I could say maybe all the vendors in a certain city or a certain class or that have a certain area code or whatever it is, and I could click on a subset of those vendors. And if I go out in navigation list, I've got all these options. I can go out to reports and say, let's print an age trial balance, and I want detail, and I want it as of a certain date. And now it's going to print an age trial balance for just those vendors. They were not all in the row, but now I very easily can have those vendors on my age trial balance. So just a little bit about navigation list. Now the other thing that I mentioned just now is document attachment and emailing, and that also leads me to workflow. So in payables, I can have documents that I have sent through workflow. And so this document is an invoice in AP, and it says it needs pending user action. It needs to be approved. Well, as a user who approves these things, I can say, let me look at this. Let me go to that transaction, and let me look at it. And then you know what? I want to see any attachments on it. And so I could have, as the user who put in the system, oh, sorry, let me go back to Excel. As a user who put the invoice in, I could have attached an Excel document to it. I could have attached a PDF. I could have attached a Word document. So from within here, all I did was say, I'm going to look at this document, and it pulled it up. So how do I do all that? It's very simple. I'll show you in a second. But we were talking about approvals. So I can just click here and say approve, and I could approve that document. I could reject it. I could delegate it to somebody else. And all I did was go into this navigation list. Now you can also take this a step further, and you could actually have it emailed to people. And they can approve it through an email. If they want to look down to the document like I just did, then they'd at least have to be on your network and have access to GP from their workstation. So they could be within an email, click on the email, and it would take them back to GP. If they didn't have access to GP, but they just had access to the workflow, they could approve it, but they couldn't zoom down and see the details. Now, in that email, you could have all the information that they needed. You could even have the email have the attachments that you attach to it. So that was kind of part of this one, right? But then the next one is DocAttach. So I am going to just kind of flow right through and talk about document attachment and workflow while we're in this area. So two things, very, very simple. Within the system, all I'm going to do is go out and literally go to one screen and say enable doc attachment. And the big thing is I'm going to say how many megabytes can a document be, because it is absorbing those documents into your GP database. So you don't want to have people going crazy and attaching, gigabytes of data at a time. You can also have it so it flows automatically. So if I put in a AP invoice, maybe certain vendors have documents that already get attached to every invoice, or for items, or for customers, or for employees. So this is throughout the whole system. So what happens is, if I am in purchasing, and I go to transaction entry, and now I start to enter an invoice, you'll see that I have like a workflow that it's not submitted into. And so I told the system that as I put in a document, if I happen to have a batch that's called workflow, that I need to put this thing through workflow. And so what happens is, as I enter, of course I pick a vendor that is a different, let's just pick a normal vendor. I don't want to put exchange rates in. So we'll just do Adam Park, put in a document number, put in an amount, and now I want to attach, let's put in a bigger amount. I've already got my distributions that default automatically. I want to attach something. So literally, I can be in here, and then I can go find whatever it is I want to attach. Okay, so let's just say it's, I don't know, whatever, a spreadsheet of some sort or a document. And now I have a document attached. I could preview that document, so it is actually working, and I could go out and I could preview it, okay? And then the next thing I could do is I could go ahead and submit it, because if I don't submit it, it won't let me post it. If it doesn't go through workflow, and I've turned workflow on, please approve, then it wouldn't let me post. So I've now sent it to approval, and if I pull up this document again later, this is the one I just did, I would even see when it got put in there and that it's waiting for approval. So it has full document history. And now if I go back out to the transactions that are pending approval, then it would have this new document out here, and I could go to it and I could view whatever it was that I attached it. So that's all working workflow-wise. And the only thing that I did was, for my company, and we would help you set this up, is we went out to workflow maintenance, and we said that we're going to start using workflow, and that it's going to be, you could say if it's a document above a certain amount, it has to go through, or everything has to go through. In mine, I just happened to say where, it was, I can't modify it because it's active, but I just said where the batch contains WF. But then you could have multiple levels of workflow, so it's very simple to set up, and we would help you do it. So, and then I can even say, like, after 8 hours or after 3 days, let's go ahead and send another notice, you know, if I was doing email, or it would just highlight it when they went into the navigation list. So that's workflow and doc attachment. Number 6, Pistol moved to GP mod and combine. So I mentioned before that I could have account numbers that in General Ledger that I combine and modify. Well, I did want to mention that the customer and vendor combiner and modifiers are not in Pistol because they were actually moved to GP back in GP 2015. So if you are going to run a customer or a vendor and want to merge two together or want to change the ID, it's actually on the utilities menu in those areas. So under sales utilities, there's the customer combiner, and then under payables, the vendor combiner. So just that you don't even have to load anything on your system. When we upgrade you, you would automatically get it. But these days, every client that we have, we will tell you that we need to load Pistol tools because it's free, and so you'll have those too. I did want to mention that if you like numbering your customers or vendors, instead of it being, and also items, instead of it being like, you know, Collins Computing is COLLINS001, instead you just wanted a consecutive number, there's a free tool out in the community that you can just say, you know what, whenever I put in a new customer or vendor or item, just give it the next consecutive number. If that's how you want to do your numbering, you can do it that way, and there's a free add-on. I like where there's numbers and letters, but that's just me. The next thing was Jet Reports. I mentioned that Microsoft said that Management Reporter was no longer going to be a product that they enhance. And so there are going to be all kinds of vendors out there that say, hey, come take a look at my product. And so Jet Reports is one of the first that have come out and said, I will give you my base product for free. And you can try it now. You don't have to get rid of my Management Reporter. You can just plop it in and start using it. And so I will say that we've had some clients that are looking at it. And the Jet Express for Excel is what it is. It's just an add-on that will look at one company database at a time, and right now doesn't have drill down. So it's a pretty basic, but can look at your data, and it can help you write financial reports, and you could get it for free. But if you have multiple companies, or you want to have some pretty complex calculations, you would upgrade to their 4 purchase items. So we have some customers that are now looking at this product, and I will tell you that we also have clients that are using BI 360 to do their financial reporting, and even dynamic budgets. So there are other products that we would say, take a look at all of them, but this is indeed a free product that you could look at, and it can run alongside with Management Reporter, and you can, you know, preview it prior. So just wanted to mention that I'm not just ignoring what's out there. BI is business intelligence. And everybody is talking about how can I get my data to be kind of open and out there so that maybe I can give it to other people and cut it and put it on portals and dashboards and all kinds of stuff. Well, along comes this thing called Odata. What Odata is data that's out there that you can read from outside of your system. And so when we're talking GP, it would be, you know, our payables, transactions, and sales, and financial, and everything else. And so what Microsoft has done is opened it up so that you can have just a link to a file, not necessarily direct to your tables in SQL, but to what's called Odata. And let me explain it a different way. So in 2016, there's something down here called Odata, and we would just link it up for you. But instead, let's say that I am just going to go out to a website. So this is going to kind of go a little crazy here. But I have a website that I've just linked to. And it's some New York state parks. And it's like how many people have gone to these state parks. And what it is, I can export this data from their website, and I have a little thing called Odata out there. And if I just copy this Odata path, I can go to my Excel, I can open up a new workbook, and I can link my data, or I can link my workbook to this open data. And all I have to do is put that path in that I just copied. And there's a couple other options, but we would help you do this if this is something that you're interested in. And so what this is doing is it's merging, perhaps, my GP data with some other data that maybe I have out there. So I just answered yes. I didn't really change anything. And now I have the exact same data on my system, and I could look and start to do sorting and say I want it for certain counties, and I want to see what the attendance was, and maybe it was for a certain year. And so you can imagine that now you could do this with GP. And literally all I did was go out to data and say I had a source out there in Odata. Now, there can be obviously hours of session time spent on that, but once I have that data, and I can take it out to something called Power BI, which is like Excel on steroids, and you can download that for free. And you can make your own portal dashboard information that you're going to track. So I will tell you that Belinda Allen is somebody in the community that has done a lot of free sessions for people and learning how to use Power BI and reading Odata. Can whoever that is that's talking, can you maybe mute your phone, please? Thanks. Okay. So there's three more things that I want. Karen, is that you? Can you mute your phone? Okay. So there are three things that I just want to end with, and one is that there is documentation by Microsoft that's updated all the time. And they now have a forever documentation page, so kind of like your forever stamps, that if you just go to this link, it will then link you out to whatever Dynamics products have been released. So I could go to 2016, I could go back to 2013. Anything that they're still supporting is out there in that link. I do want to mention that on December 1st, GP 2016 R2 was released, so most of our clients are still going to just GP 2016 because the third-party products aren't out there. But in this PowerPoint, you can go look and see that there are a few features that I've highlighted, and I'll just show you one, and then you can read through the others if you'd like. But in 2016 R2, just a per-user setting. When I go into something like General Ledger Transaction Entry or accounts payable or accounts receivable, I can have the system automatically expand, so this little down arrow. So when I put an account number in, I don't have to hit expand to put my distribution reference on this third line. And so maybe there are some windows that you want to automatically expand. And so more and more, Microsoft's going to allow you to control the settings by user of what you want to expand. There's some other items out there like protecting Smartlists so that people can't modify your Smartlist. And then even when I'm applying credit documents to a customer, that I'm getting notices that say, hey, this customer is beyond their credit limit. But I know that because I'm entering a cash receipt and they're paying. So I don't want you to warn me. So there's these things that say, hey, go look out there for any documents that may not be posted but are credits. So don't warn me about that customer going beyond their credit limit. And then just some other fixes. So I'm not going to go into those right now. I did want to mention that you'll start hearing about Dynamics 365. And at the show, this is truly a picture I took at the show, and you'll see that really it's rebranding. So Dynamics CRM is now called Dynamics 365 for Sales. AX is called Dynamics 365 for Operations. So right now it's just new product names for existing products. Dynamics GP is still called Dynamics GP. So if you're getting a bunch of emails about Dynamics 365, most likely somebody is saying, hey, how would you like to get some CRM data and automatically interface it to GP, and that's called Dynamics 365 for Sales. So just a heads up that that's what that discussion's all about. and that even anybody that has CRM already was already told that, hey, it's rebranding. So they would have gotten an email saying, just so you know, when you renew your enhancement, it's going to be called Dynamics 365. Okay, the last big user tip, and then I have one more item just to share with you, is that there was a shootout called Excel Tip Shootout. There were some magnificent things on there, some really basic ones and some very detailed ones using Power BI and Excel. But just some of the ones that I thought were cool that maybe you didn't realize is that if you put a control and a semicolon in a field in Excel, that it would automatically change that to the date, or a control with a shift and a semicolon, it'd change it to the time. So I have a whole link out there to some really simple things you can do in Excel, because I know we use Excel all the time. And one of my favorites was, you know, you give somebody a big spreadsheet, and it's got comments in the background. So if they hover over the comment, it'll appear. But instead, did you know that you could format your comment? So I could right-click on this comment, and I can actually make it stand out on my spreadsheet and show automatically. So if somebody opens up a spreadsheet that you send them, you could have the explanation of that spreadsheet showing in bold type, or, you know, in a character. I'm an Oregon Duck fan, so that's supposed to be an O for the Oregon Ducks. But it's out there. So again, I just showed you some links to how to get those type of tips in Excel. The last Excel thing that I thought was great, and I can't do it on here because you guys can't hear my speaker, but when you're in Excel, you could use something called text-to-speech commands. And all that means is that when you're entering something in Excel, if I hit this little thing right here called text, and it's a speak cell, when I enter something like a number and I hit an enter key, it would repeat back to me what I wrote. And that's really helpful if your head's down and putting in numbers. You could just have it repeat back to you what it's doing. Or let's say I just wanted it to repeat back to me if I'm in Word. So this is happening in really all Office products. You could do it in Outlook, you could do it in Word, but after you hit enter, it would rephrase to you what you've written so that you can hear it. And it's just a cool little tip, and a lot of the accountants were all over it at Summit saying I could really use that. So I showed you again how to turn it on, just like I was explaining the Smartlist export, the Smartlist solution exports. The last thing is, how do I get more, right? I need to know more about GP right now. Year-end is coming up, so I wanted to mention a couple of things. First, that there is a blog out there by Microsoft. So if you just even went into your, Google or Internet Explorer and just typed in Microsoft GP year-end blog, you would pull this up and you would get all of Terry Healy's tips for closing year-end. I took a lot of those tips, and I'm doing a session on Friday for year-end closing. And also, if you have GP and you happen to have your Connect still turned on, because a lot of our customers, we suggest they turn it off, but if you have this area called Connect turned on, if you click out from the links within there, it would take you to this blog. So it's pretty cool that this always automatically comes up no matter what version of GP you're running, as long as you're running one that had this home page with the Connect area in it. The other things that you could scroll through are just like other areas out in, the blogs in GP community that you can click right out on. So just a shout out for that. Now, where is the next summit? So all of these tips I took from some of the sessions that I went to and customers went to. Next year, October 10th through 13th, it's in Nashville, which is pretty cool. I was going to go out there anyway to see Marcus Marietta, who's the next Duck, play football. So I'm going to go and stay for a game. So that's in Nashville. But I did want to mention, because a lot of our customers are on the West Coast, that in March, they're going to have their second GPUG Amplify conference. So let me pop back for a second. This summit in Nashville is for all of the Dynamics products, so Dynamics 365 and AX and GP and Nav and BI and Solomon and all those. This conference is only for GP users. So it's in March in Anaheim, and it's the only event for customers that is always and only GP focused, except you do get a little BI, so some of the Excel and Power BI sessions, and then just Microsoft like SQL sessions or Outlook and how to, interface with GP. But I did want you to just know that those are out there. And that's what I've got for you guys today. If you've got a couple of questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to send this presentation to you, and hopefully the recording went well, and I'll also send you the link to the recording. Any questions from anybody? No? Okay. Well, I thank you guys for attending, and I hope that you learned something that maybe you can share with others. And like I said, I'll send you all of the information so that you can run through it again, and you don't have to remember how to get to Smartlist exports or something. So thanks, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. See you Friday if you want. Let me know, and I'll send you a link to the year-end closing session.
Thanks, Abra.
Absolutely. Bye. Thank you.